Magic Earth, Chapter 9. The silence that fell over the ritual chamber wasn't just silence. It was the kind of void born when something irretrievable occurs. The ether flower, the variable leaf, and the forgotten root were gone. Stolen, escaped, lifted by the hands of Spies, or Noyle, or the shadow between the two, and carried away on the back of a griffin that sliced through the gray sky like a final sentence. The Mage-Kings stood motionless, as if the ground had given way beneath them. Nopsum trembled. Mutter seemed smaller than ever, and Arrow clenched his fist so hard his knuckles turned white. None of them could form a complete sentence. They just stared at each other, mute, trying to piece back a world that no longer existed. But the news of the plant's theft wasn't confined to the castle walls. When the gates opened and the truth swept across the inner courtyard, the people exploded. Screams, crying, accusations. "They hid it! They hid it the whole time!" a man yelled. "The plants were real, and they were here!" shouted another. "The Mage-Kings betrayed us!" And then the crowd turned into a wave. An uncontrollable wave. A wave that moved toward the castle, not with weapons, but with fury. The kings, fragile after the revelation, retreated. None of them had the strength, physical, political, or magical, to control that avalanche of fear and indignation. It was Jack who stepped forward first. He climbed the cold castle steps, raised his hands and yelled, "Stop!" His voice cut through the air like a blade. It wasn't magic, it was something deeper. The crowd stopped. Jack took a deep breath. He felt the eyes of all Magic Earth on his shoulders. "The plants were stolen," he said, his voice firm. "And yes, they were here. They were hidden. They were kept secret. But now it doesn't matter what the kings did. It doesn't matter what was omitted. Noyle is coming. The mist is coming. And if we fight among ourselves, if we accuse each other now, he wins before the war even begins." The people were silent. For the first time, a silence of listening, not of fear. "We'll have time to demand answers," Jack continued. "We'll have time to demand the truth from the kings. But right now we need to survive. And we will only survive together." A murmur passed through the crowd. Jack didn't back down. "If you want to blame me later, you can blame me. If you want to judge me later, you can judge me. But before all that, I'm going to fight, and I need you to fight with me. You are the heart of this kingdom, and what is coming outside wants to rip that heart out once and for all." The people looked at him as if they were seeing something new, something they didn't expect to see in that boy with no magic, no title, no noble blood. Someone shouted, "Jack speaks like a leader." Another, "Follow the boy. He saved us once." And the revolt turned into hope. Chaos turned into direction. And Jack, without realizing it, had become the center of a fractured world. The Mage-Kings, behind him, watched in silence. They, who were the power of Mageland, now leaned, without admitting it, on the boy who shouldn't have any power at all. And Jack descended the steps, his heart pounding fast, knowing that something new had begun there, something he hadn't asked for, something he might not be able to sustain, but something that was now inevitable. And it was he who had to lead. When the courtyard finally calmed and the people dispersed, Jack entered the main hall accompanied by the Mage-Kings and Nopsum's elder counselors. The environment, lit by flickering torches, felt tighter. Or perhaps it was just the feeling that everyone there carried too much guilt to fit within the stone walls. Iroh was the first to speak. "Jack, we never imagined that Spies, that Thomas..." "Maybe it wasn't Thomas," Mutar cut in a nervous whisper. Everyone turned to him. "What are you saying?" Nopsum questioned. Mutar took a deep breath, like someone trying to reorganize shattered thoughts. In that instant, Before he fled, I swear I saw his face. Different. Different how? Jack asked, feeling his stomach clench. I don't know. It was as if his features were slipping, as if they weren't fixed. Just for a second. But I saw it. Silence. A heavy silence, until someone murmured, "Then, he might not be Thomas." For some, the phrase was a relief. For others, a nightmare. "It's just a suspicion," Muhtar added, "but we can't ignore it." Jack felt a wave of memories wash over him. His conversations with Spez, the advice, the warnings, the half-truths, and especially one detail that now made more sense than ever. The dragon was the most resilient of animals to magic. It couldn't be controlled without it. I only managed to dominate it, with great sacrifice, and for a short time. These words from Spes echoed in Jack's head like a belated revelation. If Spes had truly dominated the dragon, if he had managed to bend such ancient creatures, then what else was he capable of molding? Jack thought of the monsters that attacked them on the journey south. The Cerberus, the winged bull, the hyenas. Creatures that seemed made to kill, but also to test. Maybe. Jack spoke slowly. He also created those monsters, or trained them, or molded them with magic. Iroh, Muhtar, and Nopsum exchanged glances with a fear not of the enemy, but of the past. Then came the confession no one expected. Nopsum, his voice low, said, We exiled many good mages, talented mages, mages who wouldn't accept our rules. Iroh completed in a thread of a voice. We were afraid of them, afraid of what they might become. Muhtar, without looking at anyone. And now we're afraid of what they have become. Jack remained silent. The truth was hard, very hard, but it needed to be said. And you, Jack swallowed hard. You also hid from the people that you were weak, that your powers were diminishing. None of the kings responded. The admission was written on their faces. If we can't rely on magic, Jack said, then we need something that doesn't depend on it. Muhtar looked up. And what would that be? Jack answered without hesitation. A dragon. The hall went cold. Literally, the temperature seemed to drop. That's madness, one of the counselors murmured. No one crosses the mist and comes back alive. Madness, another repeated, is waiting for Noyle to reach the walls and just standing still. No one spoke for a few seconds. Iroh finally sighed. The worst thing is, the boy might be right. The counselors tried to argue, but everyone knew the truth. The plan was suicidal, yes, but it was the only plan, and if they failed, Plan B was just to survive, to flee to distant forests, high caves, forgotten islands, to live hidden like rats in a world that would no longer be theirs. Jack saw the shadow of that reality taking shape, and for a moment he felt fear. But the thought of his family, Lys's face, Melanie's laugh, his father's calloused hands, pushed the fear into the background. He couldn't stop. Not now. At the end of the meeting, it was decided. Jack would lead the group. 2 generals from each kingdom would go with him. And they would ride north at dawn. The Mage-Kings stayed behind, with the castle increasingly vulnerable. And Jack, stepping out into the courtyard, felt a heavy certainty in his chest. If we fail, magic earth falls. The group left Nopsum at dawn. There were no grand speeches, no formal blessings. Just men mounted on strong horses, closed faces, and footsteps that seemed to carry the weight of a world beginning to collapse. Jack rode ahead, the wind cutting his face and the memory of his family warming his chest. He didn't know exactly where the plan started. He only knew that without a dragon they wouldn't stand a chance against Noyle. The generals of the 3 kingdoms accompanied him in silence, each with his own fears. Even they, men accustomed to war, understood that this was no ordinary expedition. It was a race against the end. By the end of the first day, they sighted the mist. It formed a dull, white wall, a band that tore the landscape like a boundary imposed by the world itself. It had no claws, no whispers, no shadows. It just looked like fog. But everyone knew. The denser it got, the stronger Noyle became. "Entering that at night would be stupid," said Arrow's general. "In the daytime, at least we see what attacks us." Jack agreed. The mist didn't hurt, but it hid, and it hid exactly where Noyle liked to move. They camped far from it, where the air still had sound and color. Jack slept poorly, dreaming of faces disappearing and voices calling to him through nothing. The next day, when the pale sun rose, they entered. The change was immediate, not in the body, but in the environment. Inside, the world felt muffled. Colors faded. Sounds became distant. Even the wind seemed to think twice before touching someone. Still, no one felt pain, dizziness, or confusion. The mist didn't destroy, but it made everything feel wrong. "Maintain formation," ordered Muhtar's general. "If something attacks, funnel it to the center." Jack took a deep breath and kept his sword firm in his hand. The first attack came fast. A massive Cerberus burst from behind pale rocks, running with its 3 heads in disharmony, as if each wanted to reach them first. "Left," Jack shouted. The soldiers reacted with precision, dodging the creature's leaps. The Cerberus didn't seem to want to kill them immediately. It seemed, as before, to gauge. 2 soldiers managed to strike it before it retreated back into the mist, suddenly disappearing, without a sound. Not dead, just satisfied. Jack didn't like that. It was as if the monsters were marking each of them, understanding their styles, rhythms, and weaknesses. On the 3rd day, another attack came. This time, silent and brutal. From the sides of the road, between pale, ice-covered rocks, the bat bull charged with full force. It was huge, heavy, with a muscular body and a deformed face, as if someone had tried to mix a bull and a nocturnal creature. It had no wings but moved with impossible speed for something its size. "Right," Jack yelled. The monster advanced like a living battering ram, tearing up snow and dirt. The horses nearly bolted. One soldier was thrown from his saddle, rolling on the frozen ground. The generals reacted with discipline, spears forward, shields raised. The bat bull didn't seek to kill at that moment. Like the Cerberus, it struck, tested, felt the group's resistance, and then retreated back into the mist, disappearing without a trace. The silence that remained wasn't relief. It was unease. Jack realized they weren't being hunted. They were being studied. And it was on the 5th day that the sounds of torn wings emerged behind them. The winged hyenas. 5, as before. But this time Jack was ready. He already understood their rhythm, how they opened their wings before diving, how they retreated at the slightest precise counterattack, how they circled the group in a spiral. "Form the hollow," Jack ordered. The soldiers obeyed, forming a circle of spears pointed outward, leaving the center empty. It was an ancient defensive technique used against intelligent predators. The hyenas dove, but couldn't break the formation. 4 retreated after minor injuries. A 5th, more daring, advanced too far, and fell under 2 simultaneous spears. The attack ceased as quickly as it came. Jack realized his heart was racing, but not from fear, from strategy, from calculation, from focus. He was adapting, terribly fast. The creatures didn't kill anyone this time. But the mist took its toll in another sense. On the 4th day, a horse slipped on a hidden rock, and Iroh's soldier fell onto hard stones. He didn't get up again. On the 6th day, during a tactical retreat, A winged hyena reached Nopsum's general from behind. He fought bravely but didn't survive. Jack watched the scene without being able to intervene in time. The blow struck more than just flesh. It struck morale, and it struck Jack at the most vulnerable point. He knew he was getting closer and closer to his home. When they finally emerged from the mist in the north and saw the walls of Arrow's kingdom, Jack felt his chest tighten. The city was too silent. No flags, no guards, no fire in the windows. "We can't enter now," said Muhtar's general. "It's night. What if the enemy is inside?" Jack closed his eyes. He wanted to go in. He needed to go in. But he knew the general was right. He slept little that night. Or tried to sleep. Because when he closed his eyes, he saw his family walking inside the mist, like distant shadows calling his name. At dawn, Jack woke everyone up. "Let's go. Now." They galloped to the Traveler's Rest Tavern. The place looked as if time had been interrupted. The door was ajar. A chair was overturned. A plate still held half a meal. A wet cloth was forgotten on the counter. But no people. No trace. Jack walked through the empty interior, feeling the world crumble with every step. Father. Mother. Liz. Silence. A silence that hurt. Jack fell to his knees and cried. He cried until he had no strength left in his arms, until his chest ached as if it had been ripped open. One of the generals knelt beside him and said in a low voice, "If they're not dead, then there's still hope." Jack held on to that sentence like someone clutching a board in the middle of a shipwreck, and he stood up. He didn't know if he had the strength, but he knew he couldn't stop. Leaving the empty tavern, the group felt the weight of the silence, as if they were carrying stones in their chests. The sky was pale, without defined light, and the city of Eldoria seemed suspended in time, neither alive nor dead, just interrupted. Jack walked slowly, as if each step was toward a sentence. He knew every street, every window, every stone in those walls. It was his home. It was his world, and now it was too empty to be real. Arrow's general watched him for a few moments before saying, "Jack, we can't stay. The mist is moving too fast. If we stay here a few more hours, we'll be trapped." Jack took a deep breath, trying to control the throat closed by pain. "I know." He wiped his face with the sleeve of his cloak. "Let's go." But before leaving, he placed one hand on the tavern door, as if touching his family through the cold wood, and silently promised, "I will find you, wherever you are." Then he turned his back and moved on. The journey north proceeded, darker than before. Now, besides fear, there was grief. And besides grief, there was urgency. The mist seemed thicker in some spots, but it still didn't cause direct damage. No strange thoughts. No pain. No hallucinations. But the generals noticed something else. "It's too quiet," Muhtar's general murmured. And it was. Even the creatures seemed less present, as if they were waiting for something, as if a greater intention were moving behind them. Jack felt they couldn't waste time. Every second in Eldoria had been a knife in his chest. Now, moving forward was the only way not to break. On the 8th day of travel, the mist began to thin, giving way to a different landscape. More twisted trees, pointed hills, rocks deformed by the wind. There had been no signs of human life for a long time. At the end of a slope, only half the group remained. Jack. 2 generals, Nopsums, had died in the crossing. 3 soldiers. When they stopped to drink water, one of the generals took a deep breath, exhausted. "We have no idea where to go anymore." He looked at Jack. "This plan, this path, was yours from the start. So tell us, where now?" Jack looked around, at that landscape that seemed made of silence. And then he looked at the white sky, the distant mountains, the line of mist that accompanied them like a living carpet. A strange sensation ran through his body. It wasn't magic. It wasn't normal intuition. It was as if someone were indicating the way, not with words, but with direction. He pointed north, a little beyond two rocks that formed a kind of crooked arch. There. The general narrowed his eyes. How do you know? Jack didn't hesitate. I don't know. He paused. But I feel it, as if someone is talking to me, without talking, just pointing. The soldiers exchanged glances, uncomfortable, but they had no alternative. Jack wasn't a mage, he wasn't a seer, but there was something in him, something that had been growing since Eldoria, and they trusted him. They crossed the arch of rocks, walked across barren lands for another entire day, and then they saw. Ahead, like a tear in the devastated world, there was a valley. Green. Lush, with a natural glow that contrasted with everything around it. No mist. By all the stars, Muter's general murmured. The air there was warm, fresh, newborn, as if the world itself had decided to survive only in that place. Jack felt a chill. It wasn't an abandoned place. It was a protected place, but they didn't know by whom or by what. And then, before they could get any closer, they heard the roar. A deep, grave roar that made the ground vibrate slightly. On the other side of the valley, 3 enormous shapes appeared, advancing with heavy steps. 3 dragons. Alive, immense, terrifying, and incredibly beautiful. Their scales shone like wet gemstone. Their eyes were intelligent, watchful, and the air around them trembled as if it were being molded. The generals drew their swords. The soldiers swallowed hard. Jack didn't move. His heart was racing, but not from fear. For the first time since Eldoria, he felt something different. The dragons stared at him, directly, as if they understood, as if they recognized him, and Jack took a step forward. "Don't attack," he said. The generals looked at him, horrified. "Are you crazy? They'll devour us." Jack didn't answer. He took one more step closer, and another. The dragons growled low, but didn't attack. Jack felt a strange pulsation inside his chest, not magical, not divine, but deep, almost bone deep, as if an invisible cord linked him to those creatures. Something was changing in him, something no one could explain, not even him. And then, in the middle of that tense silence, the dragon in the center lowered its head, just a few inches, but enough for everyone to understand. They accepted him. The return journey took much less time. Mounted on the dragons, 2 people per creature, they cut through gray skies and frozen lands like arrows shot against fate. When they approached Nopsum, the entire castle erupted in clamor. Screams, tears, hope. The walls had never seen anything like it. Jack, mounted on the front dragon, seemed bigger than he was. Not because of power, not because of magic, but because the world, for a brief instant, dared to believe again. But the hope lasted only a moment. When they landed in the courtyard, Mutar's general turned pale and pointed to the horizon. "Jack, look." There, advancing like a living wall, came the mist, and in front of it, Noyle, standing, motionless, watching the castle of Nopsum, as if he were waiting for them. Jack dismounted the dragon, his heart pounding. The moment had arrived. When Jack landed in the courtyard of Nopsum's castle, the air vibrated with a mix of awe and hope. Soldiers ran to the walls. Children pointed with shining eyes. Men and women knelt, not in reverence, but in pure relief, like finding a piece of the future where they had expected nothing more. The dragons roared, their voices echoing like subterranean thunder, and the sound traveled across the entire kingdom. Even the most skeptical warrior felt his heart respond. For an instant, magic earth seemed breathable again. But then, the alarm sounded, a grave, slow, repeating bell, the toll that should never sound. The enemy is at the gates. Muter's general, still mounted, pointed to the northern horizon, where the mist approached like a living wall. It came fast, pushing the world back. And on the line of the mist, clear, motionless, as if anchored to the void itself, stood him. Noyle. Not a monster. Not a shadow. Not a scream. But a human presence. Simple. Terribly tranquil. With his body still as a statue and his face expressionless, watching the castle like someone watching a play about to end. Jack jumped off the dragon. The generals followed him. Arrow, Mutar, and Nopsum ran to the courtyard. And when they saw Noyle in the distance, their faces paled as if their blood had evaporated. "He arrived too early," Arrow murmured. "No," Mutar replied. "He arrived exactly when he wanted to arrive. His presence," Nopsum rubbed his chest, "it has increased. He's stronger. Much stronger." Iroh turned his face to Jack, his voice grave. The mist amplified his power. He should never have been able to get this close. Jack couldn't tear his eyes away from the solitary figure standing in the distance. It was Spess. It was Thomas. It was Noyle. The body was familiar, but the energy was nothing human. For a moment, Jack felt he was looking at something that shouldn't exist on that plane. One of the soldiers on the walls shouted, He's smiling." And he was. An almost imperceptible smile. Not of victory, not of threat, but of understanding. As if he had expected exactly that moment. As if he had waited for Jack to return mounted on dragons. As if he had waited for the reunion. Jack felt his heart pound. He didn't know why, but it was as if Noyle knew he would come. As if he had left room for it. Soldiers hurried down from the walls, forming ranks. The desperate population rushed inside their homes. The castle doors were locked and reinforced. One of the commanders shouted, "Prepare the arrows. If he crosses the bridge, fire." But Iroh raised his hand. "No one fires without orders. No one." Everyone fell silent. The tension was so dense it felt like a different layer of air. Jack, the generals, and the Mage-Kings rushed to one of the castle balconies, where they could better see the solitary figure at the edge of the mist. Noyle took one step, just one, and the mist behind him moved as if it were being pulled by invisible threads. It was an organized movement, intentional, as if the mist obeyed, as if the mist were written, and he were the writer. Jack felt his stomach turn. Iroh gripped the railing. He's stronger than ever, the theft of the plants. He swallowed hard. He must already be using some of their power. Muter murmured, "Not all of it, not yet. If he were at his peak, the castle would have already fallen." Nopsum completed, "He's testing. He always tests before he acts." Jack didn't answer. He finally understood something he had only intuited before. Spess, or whoever Spess had been, had never lied about the nature of the mist. But he had lied about himself. Noyle raised his head, and even at a distance, even through the wind, even with the wall between them, Jack felt as if the gaze fell directly upon him. Not on the castle, not on the dragons, not on the kings, on him, Jack. It was a wordless call, a gesture that wasn't a gesture, an order that hadn't been spoken, but which Jack still understood. Mutar's general frowned. "Jack, you've gone pale." Jack touched his chest. calling me. Arrow took a step back. Don't go near him, Jack. No matter what you do, don't go. But Jack already knew that moment was inevitable. The mist advanced slowly. Noyle too. But it was Jack who needed to take the first step. Not because he was brave. Not because he wanted to. But because in a way he still didn't understand, he was part of what was happening. Part of what Noyle wanted. Part of what Noyle needed. Part of what the world had become. And maybe part of what could save it or destroy it. Jack inhaled deeply, and then he took the first step toward the wall. The entire castle seemed to hold its breath. Jack descended the stone stairs while soldiers, generals, and even the Mage-Kings shouted behind him, but their voices seemed distant, muffled, as if coming from underwater. He heard nothing but his own heart. And Noyle's steps. The mist advanced without haste, as if it had all the time in the world. And maybe it did. Jack crossed the courtyard. The dragons followed him with their eyes, restless, growling low, as if they sensed that something invisible was pressing the air. They didn't move, but they didn't look away either. Reaching the outer wall, Jack climbed to the top, by order of Arrow, who ran after him and reached him on the last step. "You won't cross this line," the Mage-King said, breathless. "I won't allow it." Jack looked at the mist, then at Noyle. He finally replied, "I wasn't going to cross it anyway." Arrow narrowed his eyes. "Then why did you come here?" Jack inhaled deeply, the cold entering his lungs like needles. "Because he wanted me to come." Muhtar and Nopsum arrived soon after, both pale, both with the expression of those who find no answers, and fear finding them. Iroh's general climbed last, sword already in hand. "If he takes another step, we attack," he said firmly. But none of them knew if it would make a difference. Noyle advanced just one more single step. The mist moved with him, like an obedient animal. He stopped at the exact limit where the stone bridge connecting the free lands to the castle began. He didn't cross. He didn't force it. He just stood there, as if he were waiting. Jack observed every detail of that face. It was Spess's face, the hair, the short beard, the thoughtful look. But something was wrong. Something deeply wrong. And then Jack realized what it was. There was no tiredness, no pain, no cold, no humanity. It was a face. Hollow. A face that seemed to exist only because it needed to exist. Whatever was there wasn't Spee's, and perhaps it never had been. Jack leaned over the wall, gripping the stone. "Why doesn't he attack?" Muhtar whispered. "Because he doesn't want to bring down the castle," Nopsum replied. "He wants something else," Iroh completed. "He wants something that's here." Jack swallowed hard. "He wants me." Everyone turned to him at the same time. Muhtar frowned. "Jack, that doesn't make sense." "Yes, it does," Jack replied. He's been staring at me since he appeared. It's like..." He searched for words, as if he recognizes me, as if he was waiting for me. Nopsum gripped his chest. Iroh closed his eyes for an instant. Muhtar took a deep breath. They knew. They knew there was something about Jack that no one understood. Not even him. Something that nullified magic. Something that confused mind readers. Something that left monsters indecisive. Something that dragons recognized. Something Noyle wanted, one way or another. Jack took a step forward. Iroh gripped his arm tightly. "No," the king said, his voice firm, almost fatherly. "He wants you to come down. He wants you to get closer. He wants you inside the mist. Jack, don't do it." Jack looked at him and saw fear, real fear. Fear that no Mage-King would ever admit. For a moment, Jack wanted to say he wouldn't get closer. He wanted to promise he would stay there, safe. But he knew he couldn't lie, because inside his chest, a silent, ancient force seemed to push him toward Noyle, not as a magical call, not as mental domination, but as if destiny itself were demanding his presence. He inhaled deeply and said, "I won't go down, but I need to talk to him from here." Iroh hesitated, but released Jack's arm. Jack advanced to the edge of the wall. Noyle raised his face. His eyes, not Spess's eyes, not Thomas's, but the eyes of something much deeper, fixed directly on Jack's, and for an instant, the world stood still. The mist stopped. The wind stopped. Even Jack's heart seemed to stop beating. It was then that Noyle, without moving his lips, transmitted something that Jack didn't hear with his ears, but with his soul. A silent message, a meaning that had no form, but had weight. Jack's eyes widened. He took a step back. Iroh held him before he fell. "What did he do?" the king asked. Jack took a deep, deep breath and replied with a broken voice. He knows where my family is." Absolute silence on top of the wall, until the wind returned and snapped against the worn banners. Jack closed his eyes, his chest burning inside. "And he said that..." He paused, his throat closing. "That I can have them back. If I go to him..." Mutar cursed. Nopsum turned snow-white. Iroh shook his head in despair. "Jack, it's a trap!" the king exclaimed. "He's using your greatest fear against you." Jack knew. He knew more than anyone. But Noyle's message was not just an invitation. It was a promise, and a threat. The mist advanced a little more, slow, inevitable. The dragons roared, restless. The soldiers approached, ready to fight. And Jack stood there, on the edge of the wall, between the castle and the mist, between the world he knew and the world that wanted to swallow everything. He knew that choice, to approach or not, didn't need to be made yet. But he also knew that the war had begun at that exact instant, and that his family, alive, lost, somewhere Noyle could reach, was now part of that game. A game he never wanted to play, but one he could no longer leave. Jack opened his eyes. "He came for me," he said finally. "And nothing we do will change that." The castle towers trembled under the distant roar of the dragons, and the mist advanced one more step,